Yuta Okkotsu, the second only to Satoru Gojo, against the strongest sorcerer in the modern era, Satoru Gojo himself. On paper, this matchup seems really one-sided, which it is because even at the end of the series, Yuta wasn't able to reach Gojo's level, let alone surpass him. So Gojo does win against Yuta because Yuta doesn't have any counters to Gojo's win cons. But to make it more fun and engaging, let's go back in time and use the teenage version of Gojo which we saw in the Hidden Inventory arc. Not the pre-awakened one, as that one is pretty overkill in Yuta's favor, but the awakened one we saw against Toji, the honored one himself against the cursed child Yuta Okkotsu. To start off, can Yuta even bypass the infinity to land any hits on Gojo to begin with? And to answer that, yes he can. To be more precise, Yuta has two ways he can bypass infinity with. 3 if you believe sky manipulation can bypass it as well. Jacob's ladder is one of Yuta's most potent options to bypass it, as it is defined as a technique that extinguishes any cursed object or cursed technique, but to use it, Yuta would require the fully manifested Rika to activate it or his domain. The other option, pretty self-explanatory one, is his domain expansion, and lastly, sky manipulation, if you believe it could bypass infinity or not. With that, Yuta has the tools to bypass Gojo's defense, but does he have the offense to beat Gojo? Now before that, we have to take into consideration the scaling of Awakened Gojo in his fight against Toji. Gojo, after healing his injuries and fatigue, was easily able to dodge Toji's attack and was able to damage him with red and kill him with a purple. But it is important to point out that Toji at this point in the story was deviated from his true self, which made him ignore his senses. Yuta on the other hand should be relative to Maki, who is equal to Toji physically. Yuta also was able to take multiple hits from Ryu, who has the highest output according to Kenjaku, and tank Grenade Blast, the same Ryu who 16 Fingers Maguna needed a direct hit to one-shot. So Yuta clearly has the stats to keep up with Awakened Gojo, and I don't think red would be enough to damage Yuta, and around this time in the story, Gojo didn't have a domain expansion, so his only win condition would be to use a hollow purple to finish off Yuta, which would be really hard to pull off. Yuta clearly has sky manipulation, which would be able to counter both red and purple, which would allow him to completely avoid them or throw them back at Gojo, as they are traveling abilities, and sky manipulation should be able to change their trajectory since it bends the space itself. So Yuta has overwhelming counters to most of Gojo's kit. In a domain, Gojo's only source of defense would be Simple Domain and Falling Blossom Emotion, and if we were to believe that these two would be enough to protect Gojo from whatever sure hit Yuta decides to have in his domain, even though we know that Falling Blossom Emotion is only effective against simple techniques like slashes, Gojo would still have to take on both Yuta and Rika. Natively, this Gojo should be relative to Teen Geto in combat, who showed decent feats, though this doesn't help him much as Yuta was pretty relative to Adult Geto in JJK Zero, who should be stronger than his teen counterpart. However, with red and blue, Gojo could enhance his combat quite drastically, as even prior to his awakening, Gojo was pretty good with using blue. Considering he would be able to protect himself from Jacob's ladder with Simple Domain once Gojo is caught in Yuta's domain. Not only does he have to keep his Simple Domain up until he does enough damage to Yuta, but he would also have to take on Yuta and Rika head-on, while simultaneously keeping track of every time Yuta switches to a new technique. If you believe that an Awakened Gojo is capable of pulling this off, then he does win, because once the domain breaks, Yuta would be on Curse Technique Burnout, which would give Gojo enough time to use purple on him to finish the fight. But if Gojo cannot sustain his Simple Domain until the domain collapses, then he would be at a severe disadvantage, as he won't be able to use red or blue to his advantage, which is likely the case. So overall, Yuta has the counters to red and purple through sky manipulation, which would help him avoid taking damage. He can bypass Gojo's infinity through his domain or Jacob's ladder. He has the stats to keep up with him and the offensive capabilities to win the fight. It's a no-brainer that Yuta would have a significant advantage over Gojo inside the domain, and in most scenarios, Yuta would win against Gojo in it. Yuta would likely have the edge over Gojo in close combat as well, especially with Rika assisting him, giving him another advantage. And I'm not entirely sure how Cursed Speech would work against this version of Gojo, but most likely it wouldn't have an effect. Though if it can have an effect, then it gives Yuta yet another advantage. As for Gojo, he has to make sure to damage Yuta enough to collapse the domain and then finish him off with Hollow Purple afterward, as using Purple before that would be useless since Yuta can avoid it through sky manipulation. And if both were to have a beam clash, then Gojo would win that, as Purple is clearly superior to Yuta's Love Beam. But I don't think Yuta will engage in that because he himself knows how strong Purple is. So in most scenarios, Yuta would likely emerge victorious unless he gets hit with a Purple. Yuta would clearly be losing it. One last thing I want to add that most people forget about is that this Yuta would have a great understanding of how this version of Gojo thinks and would react. Why? Simply because we know Yuta switched bodies with Gojo in Shinjuku, and while he was inside Gojo's body, he had access to all of Gojo's memories, which would give Yuta another slight advantage as he would have a good idea of how Gojo might react or go on about certain things. Overall though, I believe Yuta should be able to take this fight and win. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with the reasoning that I presented in this video, or do you see this matchup the other way around? Make sure to write it down in the comment section regarding whatever you think, and I'll see you all in the next one.